This is CBC Winnipeg News.
Good evening. Thanks for joining us. The Premier says it's time to put the chainsaws down after months of fighting between developers, residents and protesters pushing to protect a parcel of land in South Winnipeg at risk of being deforested. The province is now stepping in. Wab Kinew says the government will expropriate the Lemay forest and turn it into a provincial park. CBC's Cameron McLean has the latest.
Plans to clear trees in Lemay Forest appear to be moving ahead Monday morning. The owner, Child Development Group, wants to build a 5,000-bed assisted living facility. Opponents have pushed the city of Winnipeg and the province to preserve the forest. Today, Premier Wab Kinew announced plans to do just that.
So I want the chainsaws to stop, and to that end, the province of Manitoba is going to expropriate Lemay Forest and turn it into a provincial park.
The forest covers roughly 18 hectares along the Red River in St. Norbert. Advocates have said the forest is an important ecological and historical site. The Manitoba Historical Society has said the forest houses a cemetery site belonging to a former orphanage. Advocates for the Lemay Forest have tried for years to prevent chainsaws from cutting down these trees, including offers to buy the land and legal challenges. Supporters hope this decision from the province means that the chainsaws have been silenced for good.
I cried tears of joy.
Louise May is one of the leaders of the movement to save the forest. She tried to stop the cutting by bringing forward a private prosecution under the Cemeteries Act, but prosecutors recently told her they would not proceed with the case. Now, she says, she has hope.
This morning when they started cutting, I felt the least hopeful I had ever felt. And then suddenly, the Premier stepped up and took action, and I appreciate that.
The forest has been the site of conflict between protesters and the developers. Monday morning, police arrested one of the demonstrators for violating a court order meant to keep protesters from blocking access to the site. John Wintrip represents the developer. He says he was blindsided by the Premier's announcement.
We reached out to them multiple times. I reached out to Premier Wab Kinew going back 18 months looking for advice, looking for direction, looking for help on this matter. He completely ignored us all along, and then I find out through the media his announcement.
The Premier says the paperwork to do the expropriation will take time. Wintrip says the developer will not simply give up his land, and any expropriation will cost Manitoba taxpayers dearly. Cameron McLean, CBC News, Winnipeg.
Meantime, the Premier says he's directed Manitoba Hydro to not renew contracts, sending 500 megawatts of power to the U.S. The contracts are set to expire at the end of the month. But as CBC's Bartley Kivas reports, Hydro had no plans to renew them.
Now you're all supposed to applaud, like we see on TV.
A little bit of theater for Manitoba's Premier after he signed an order to, in his words, repatriate 500 megawatts of power currently sold to the U.S.
We're bringing back some of this power to our country so that we can build up the next generation of Canadian infrastructure.
The electricity in question was sold to Northern States Power. It's part of Xcel Energy, a private utility based in Minneapolis. 2 contracts totaling 500 megawatts expire at the end of this month. Kinew says that electricity is needed north of the border.
Baseload power is the most valuable thing in the world right now. Baseload power meaning power that's not depending on the wind blowing or the sun shining, but electricity that flows 24/7.
The Premier couldn't say how much revenue Hydro will miss out on by selling this electricity north of the border. He says some may be sold to Western Canada and ordered 50 megawatts to be reserved for none of it if a transmission line is ever extended north. PC Hydro critic Lauren Stone says she's concerned because Hydro is nearly $25 billion in debt and must spend $31 billion to fix up aging infrastructure and build new generating capacity.
When the Premier came out with his announcement today, it really didn't sound like he thought through what those cost implications are.
Hydro says the costs are already built into its application to raise electricity rates almost 11% over 3 years.
We've known for some time now that these contracts were expiring and they wouldn't be renewed. So that capacity that's coming back into our system, we've already accounted for in our planning.
I asked the Premier's office why Wab Kinew signed an order not to renew contracts that weren't going to be renewed anyway. It said the Premier wanted to ensure no new export contracts would be signed. Bartley Kivas, CBC News, Winnipeg.
Winnipeg police are investigating 2 transit incidents. The first happened around 10:30 Sunday night. Police say a 31-year-old passenger was physically assaulted after he saw 2 men making unwanted advances on a 20-year-old woman, and he intervened. The 2 suspects tried to rob him before getting off the bus near Disraeli Freeway and Martha Street. 2 men were later arrested. And police also responded to a stabbing on a bus later that night on Morley Avenue and Hugo Street South. Investigators say a 22-year-old was knifed on board, again after stepping into an argument between other people. The suspects for that case are still on the loose. Police are looking to the public to help identify 2 people of interest into a fire that gutted a church in Carman last month. RCMP released grainy surveillance video images from around the time the fire broke out. The video is time-stamped at 4:05 a.m. on March 13th. Crews were dispatched to the fire minutes later. Emergency responders weren't able to get inside the church because the floor had collapsed into the basement. Instead, they battled the blaze from outside before getting to inside hotspots later on. Roughly 75% of the building's interior was compromised. An apartment building in St. Boniface is turning heads for a show of patriotism. A group of residents teamed up to get their neighbours to display their pride for the true North strong and free. As CBC's Josh Crabb reports, the idea quickly gained traction.
On a snowy spring day, signs of Canada in Winnipeg's St. Boniface area are on full display. Dozens of the country's flags hang on balconies at this apartment building called Chateau Gay.
All 3 of us decided together we would do it. Yeah, so we worked very hard together and we did it.
Lorraine Samard, Jean-Paul, and Doris Doucette sent around notes asking neighbors to hang a flag and offered them help to do it. There are 88 balconies on the south side of the building. Most agreed to put one up. The trio says they wanted to show support for the country amid turbulent times, all sparked by Donald Trump's tariffs and talk of making Canada the 51st state.
I think our political atmosphere, the election coming up, and I think lately the people are proud to be Canadians.
Organizers tell us the flags were originally on balconies that faced the south. When people with north-facing balconies heard about the display, they wanted in on the patriotism too.
It exploded.
Resident manager Michelle Vermeulen says it makes her proud.
This is Canada. We're Canadian. We're not the 51st state, never will be. And this kind of just shows that we have a lot of dedicated Canadians.
Their display was captured in this drone video shot by a local photographer who shared it online. Doris Doucette says tenants from all walks of life and backgrounds got involved, and they've got good feedback from people passing by.
And I think it makes them proud to be Canadian and maybe gives them the incentive to do something on their own. Yeah.
The building already had a flag flying on its roof. Most of the ones put on people's balconies were bought from a Canadian dollar store chain.
Well, we went to several stores. Some of them we drained them out. So.
Showing they're proud to be Canadian, and they're not shy about showing it. Josh Crabb, CBC News, Winnipeg.
Well, the Jets won the trophy, but not the game.
Shankly, rebound, score!
That was the lone Jets goal as they fell to the Oilers 4-1 Sunday. But with Washington losing its game, the Jets win the President's Trophy for finishing top in the league.
Guys should be real proud of it. Seeing how we just what we've gone through this year, and to be right in the thick of things all year long as one of the best in the league, it's a heck of an accomplishment. But at the end of the day, it's not really the trophy we're after.
The team, of course, gunning for the Stanley Cup. They closed the regular season Wednesday night against the Anaheim Ducks. Well, it wouldn't be spring here without a few flurries. Let's bring in Ethan Williams for a check on our forecast.
Well, thanks, Brittany, and some active weather to talk about happening over the weekend. Some of us getting some rain, especially those of us in northwestern Ontario. Fort Frances, nearly 20 millimeters. Boissevain also picking up over 10 millimeters. Then you get into places like Steinbach and Pinawa and Winnipeg, picking up some snow as well, especially wet snow in places like Steinbach and Pinawa, kind of mixed in with that rainfall as well. That system has now left us, but in its wake, some pretty strong wind gusts, nearly 60 kilometers an hour, especially the further south you go in the province. Thankfully, it looks like as we head into Tuesday, those winds are going to be coming down, and we'll be greeted with some sunshine as well as we start the day at around -1. By the noon hour, jumping up to +5. Again, clouds clearing away, and we're looking at a mostly sunny day for most of the day anyway in the Winnipeg area. Looking for a daytime high of around 8 degrees. Pretty nice for this time of year. But there is messier weather on the way, Brittany. I'll tell you about that in your full forecast coming up.
Thank you, Ethan. Gunfire, a chase, and an explosion. We break down the police incident straight ahead. It was a police chase that ended in an explosion and fiery blaze. Officers opened fire on a stolen truck that sped past cruiser cars on a residential street. It later slammed into a house and blew up, leaving residents in Winnipeg's West End shaken, but relieved it wasn't worse. It's a case now in the hands of the province's police watchdog. CBC's Gavin Axelrod has more.
Residents calling it unbelievable and shocking. Video posted to social media shows the Ford F-250 on Home Street Friday. Then, police open fire, and the truck's driver continues down the street. Police say it hit a second police vehicle, lost control, and hit a house. The crash started a fire that spread to a large fuel tank in the back of the truck, which exploded. Saif Zihan recorded the widely shared video. He says he started rolling because he wanted to share the footage with the driver of the black car for any insurance claim, but didn't expect the gunfire.
I was really shocked about it because that time kids were playing, and that time was like approximately 6 p.m. People were in the home as well after work, I think. And yeah, they were just shooting like open air.
It's crazy. It happened very fast. Like, you never expect something like that's going to happen in your neighborhood.
Ashley Potts' 9-year-old son ran into a neighbor's house when the shots happened. She's glad no one was hurt.
I gave her a hug and said thank you so much. I almost started crying because that's my baby, you know?
My kiddos were out just earlier the day, and I know that there were some older boys that were out still.
Police say nobody was hurt. The truck's driver and passenger ran from the wreckage and were arrested nearby. The city of Winnipeg says a cat was found dead in the home. This expert on police use of force says when police try stopping a stolen vehicle, shooting to immobilize it by firing at the tires, for example, is no longer the practice.
If the officer believes his life or someone else's life is in jeopardy as a result of the driver's maneuvering, certainly the lethal force can be utilized.
Cash Heed says the investigation will examine if that use of force was justified and was surprised by the number of shots fired, but surmises they feared for their lives.
If you look at the video, and I did multiple times, and you could see that the one officer, the driver, was somewhat protected by the vehicle, and the second officer, appears to be the passenger, certainly had an ability to get out of the way of the vehicle.
The Independent Investigation Unit has taken over the case. They investigate all serious incidents involving police in Manitoba. Gavin Axelrod, CBC News, Winnipeg.
Manitoba wants a chance at hosting one of the biggest multi-sport events in the world. The province is looking to join Canada's bid for the Commonwealth Games. For more, we're joined by the CBC's Ian Fraze live in the newsroom. Ian, how likely is this to happen?
Well, we don't know the answer to that yet. It is still very early on in this process. Basically, a group of Canada wants to host the Games in 2030. It went around asking who's interested, and 4 provinces said yes: Manitoba, Ontario, Newfoundland and Labrador, and Prince Edward Island. Now they'll all get together and explore if a Canadian bid is feasible. Manitoba's sport minister says an event like this is good for the province.
Pan American Games, Grey Cup's coming. You know, we do a great job of hosting these events. And I think, you know, it's really important with regards to Manitoba caring about tourism and the economy and growth within the economy. And, you know, hosting large events is a great way to accomplish those things.
Now, I also spoke with Brian McPherson, who heads Commonwealth Sport Canada. He says a multi-province bid like this is the only way Canada can afford to host an event of this magnitude.
Ian, meanwhile, some residents of Swan River say there's nothing fun about a community cleanup that's being advertised as a fun event. What's the concern there?
Well, they're frustrated they're being asked to clean up a mess around discarded needles that they did not cause. As we've been reporting, Swan River has been littered with needles and storefronts and playgrounds, forcing people to go out daily to clean up. Now some of the folks working in harm reduction in Swan River are organizing a spring cleanup open to everybody. The PC's justice critic isn't a fan.
Will the minister be joining local residents for their community spring cleanup event with snacks and fun or does she feel her role ends with distributing the needles and not the consequences that follow?
It's very troubling that that member would get up in this House and encourage children to go out and be picking up needles. What I would say to that member is he should be encouraging members to call that hotline to get those folks that are trained to go out and do the needle disposal and work with the...
The mayor says he's been fielding calls from people, including parents, concerned about this cleanup event. Brittany.
Thank you, Ian. That's CBC's Ian Fraze. All right, let's bring in Ethan Williams now for a look on our forecast. Ethan.
Well, Brittany, much of the moisture that we saw from that weather system over the weekend has moved out of the province, but in its wake, we are left with quite a bit of cloud cover, but that system has now moved on into Ontario. And for our friends in northwestern Ontario, seeing some snow, at times heavy through the day here Monday. And on the other side of this system, it's some pretty significant rainfall, which is moving through the rest of northern Ontario. But that whole system will continue to pull away as we go into the overnight hours here. And as we get into tomorrow, this area of high pressure starts to develop over the province, landing us with a lot of some sunshine pretty much province-wide. That doesn't stick around for long, though. As soon as that's out of here, a couple of areas of low pressure developing in Saskatchewan are going to bring through some moisture, mostly in the form of snow for northern Manitoba. Maybe some rain showers early Wednesday morning for Winnipeg and the Red River Valley and through the Inner Lake. And then as we get later into the day, Wednesday and into Thursday, the cold front from this drawing up some moisture through southern Manitoba as we get through the day there. Rainfall totals, we're still a couple of days away from the heaviest of the rain, but I think a few millimeters not to be ruled out, especially in extreme southern portions of the province, and maybe 5 to 10 through northwestern Ontario. For northern Manitoba, again, I think this is almost exclusively a snowfall event with a little bit of rain mixed in there. It'll be wet snow for the most part. These totals may be a little bit on the high side, but I think maybe a good 10 to 15 centimeters in that corridor from Taduli Lake through Shamattawa, the God's Lake area. Not out of the question there, but that's where the heaviest of that snow is going to be concentrated. As the snow moves through northern Manitoba, those winds are going to start to pick up. High pressure on Tuesday means it'll be a fairly calm day, but getting into Wednesday as that system moves through, you can see gusts near 60 kilometers an hour once again in the Winnipeg area and through much of the Inner Lake and even up along the Hudson Bay coast as well. So for Tuesday, expecting a mostly sunny day. Again, temperatures just below normal for this time of year. Then we jump above normal as we get into Wednesday. That's when we have the chance of some showers as that system brings that snow through the north. And again, a blustery day, maybe gusts even a little bit higher than what I have here. Left with cloud cover for Thursday as we stay pretty much bang on seasonal for this time of year. As for what the rest of the forecast is going to bring, I'll have your full 7-day forecast, Brittany, coming up in a little bit.
Thank you, Ethan. Well, dozens of craft breweries across Canada are teaming up to produce IPAs that use 100% Canadian ingredients. The campaign is called Glorious and Free, and it's in response to U.S. tariffs and threats of annexation. Ottawa-based Dominion City Brewing launched the campaign to support the industry, providing an all-Canadian list of suppliers to brewers. More than 40 have signed on, including Kilter here in Manitoba. A chunk of profits go to charity. Much more to come right after the break. Stay with us. With just 2 weeks left until Election Day, Pierre Poilievre is digging into his promise to get tough on crime. He's vowing to use the notwithstanding clause in the Charter of Rights as part of his plan. That would be a first at the federal level, and the Conservative leader's pledge is facing harsh criticism on the campaign trail. Ashley Burke reports.
Behind in the polls, the Conservatives leader promising to do what no prime minister has done before.
I will use Section 33 of the Charter of Rights and Freedoms.
Pierre Poilievre vowing to invoke the notwithstanding clause to override the Canadian Charter of Rights for 5 years and grant judges the power to sentence mass murderers to consecutive terms of life behind bars, meaning they could be in prison until the day they die.
When you kill 6 people, you should never be eligible for parole. You should never be able to force the families of the victims to have to come and testify at a parole hearing so that they relive the hell that you've exacted on them.
Poilievre using Alexandre Bissonnette as an example. He's convicted of killing 6 people at a Quebec City mosque in 2017. The Supreme Court upheld a decision to reduce Bissonnette's life sentence in prison with no chance of parole for 40 years to 25 years to avoid cruel and unusual punishment from consecutive life sentences.
He has to be able to satisfy the government that he's not going to be a risk of committing future offenses, and it's going to be hard for him to do that.
This criminal defense lawyer says most murderers like this will never see the light of day, even as the law stands now. And he says while Poilievre's pitch may be popular, it won't make streets safer.
I think it's a desperate attempt to grab votes. I think it's a failed policy stolen out of the Trump playbook.
Poilievre's main rival says the Conservatives leader is politicizing justice, calling it a slippery slope.
I think this is a very dangerous step.
Other parties oppose Poilievre's plan too.
We should not be using the notwithstanding clause. We were looking at ways to close down its use or to restrict its use because it's deeply problematic.
You should rely more on improving justice system and laws than removing yourself from their application.
But the Canadian Police Association says, as an advocate for victims and families, it supports Poilievre's plan in this one rare circumstance. Poilievre says he's open to using this clause in other circumstances to fight crime. Ashley Burke, CBC News, Ottawa.
Liberal leader Mark Carney is promising to make significant new investments in the Canadian military and create a new defence procurement agency to streamline equipment purchases and buy Canadian whenever possible. It's all meant to reduce reliance on the United States.
Today, I'm announcing our plan to build the tools needed to ensure Canada's sovereignty, to support a new approach to made-in-Canada defence procurement, while helping our industries and businesses reach new markets around the world.
Carney also promised to build up domestic research on advanced military technologies. He also talked about doing more to secure Canada's coastlines, including the Arctic, by purchasing new submarines, icebreakers, and drones. Meantime, Carney says he was unaware some Liberal staffers had planted phony buttons at a recent Conservative gathering. Kate McKenna has those details.
Liberal leader Mark Carney says he apologizes unreservedly after we first reported that Liberal staffers were behind a move to plant buttons at a conference intended for Conservatives in Canada. 2 Liberal Party operatives went to the Canada Strong and Free Network conference last week, where they planted buttons that said "Stop the Steal," an apparent reference to the 2020 movement to overturn the U.S. election results, and also an apparent move to tie Canadian Conservatives to the MAGA movement. It only came out that the Liberal Party was behind this after we reported it, because I overheard people at a bar talking about how they had done it. Mark Carney today says that behavior is unacceptable, and he apologized for what happened.
Look, this is totally unacceptable, to be absolutely clear. And I, on behalf of my campaign, I was unaware of this behavior, but on behalf of my campaign, I apologize for it unreservedly.
The Conservative Party says these are dirty tricks in an attempt to import American politics to Canada. Meanwhile, Mark Carney says that the people involved have been reassigned to other campaign tasks. Kate McKenna, CBC News, Montreal.
NDP leader Jagmeet Singh is pledging to hire 35,000 new nurses between now and 2030 as part of his plan to tackle the nursing shortage.
In addition, we have a plan around recruitment. There are a lot of internationally trained nurses that are in our country. We need to streamline the path for them to be recognized for their work and to be able to get qualified.
He's pledging to require provinces to meet nurse-to-patient ratios, guarantee fair wages for nurses, and improve their working conditions. He also promised to offer a $5,000 tax credit to nurses and personal support workers, and to end the use of private nursing agencies in favor of reinvesting in public healthcare teams. Green Party co-leader Jonathan Pedneau was in Montreal discussing why climate action must remain a top priority in Canada.
The greatest threat to our sovereignty, our health right now is the climate emergency. And the threat is already here in Quebec and across the country. The climate crisis is not some distant possibility. It is here and it is real.
Pedneau pointed to the rising deadly and economic toll of the climate emergency. He says the Green Party supports the open letter from mayors and councillors for a bold national leadership and on climate and infrastructure. From the economy to constant threats from U.S. President Donald Trump, more Canadians are telling CBC News that this federal election feels especially important to them. Here's more on that from the Ask CBC News team's Puneet Najur.
Why does this federal election feel like such a big deal?
This election is the most consequential election of our times.
Our way of life is going to be majorly affected.
Why aren't things getting better? It feels like everything is going in reverse.
Canadians have told us that there's a few things on their minds. There's unaffordability and the high cost of housing, a strained healthcare system, and maybe one of the biggest threats hovering over Canadians, U.S. President Donald Trump's on-again, off-again tariffs. And that's why some of you said that your vote feels like it matters more than before.
Our country's identity is being attacked. We are being threatened constantly about the U.S. saying we're the 51st state. My uncles have fought in the wars to keep this country the way it is, to keep it free, to keep it the way we are. To be consumed, or even a thought in being consumed, is something that I just can't handle.
We're constantly worried about our job security and what's going to happen to our economy because of how intergrained we are with the American economy.
Housing is a big deal. I think we should get on it right away.
While we know that all elections are important, voter turnout hasn't always reflected that. It peaked in the 1958 federal election at 79%. And after fluctuating over the years, some high, some low, some high again, turnout has been dropping since 2015. According to Elections Canada, voter turnout in the 2021 federal election was about 63%. That's 4 points lower than the 2019 federal election at 67%, and 5 points lower than the 2015 federal election at 68%. But could it change for this election?
I'm really hoping that the turnout will be much, much higher than it has ever been, because we need to pull together as a country.
We can't afford to be passive like we have in the past. That's why I think we're going to see a much larger voter turnout.
If people don't vote and they don't realize the importance of their vote, if they become apathetic about it, democracy is just going to disappear before our eyes.
We'll have to wait and see if what you're telling us about this election, mattering more than ones in the past, will actually translate to higher voter turnout. I'm the election producer for the Ask CBC News team. If you have any other questions about the federal election, email us at ask@cbc.ca.
And you can watch the federal leaders' English debate here on Thursday at 6 p.m. Broadcast live on CBC TV, CBC News Network, and everywhere you stream CBC News. The Trump administration says there's no basis to bring back a man that U.S. officials wrongly deported to El Salvador last month. This despite the Maryland man having a court order to stop his deportation over fears of gang persecution in that country. Katie Nicholson has the details.
A loaded visit from El Salvador's president. as the fate of a Maryland man mistakenly deported to his country's super prison hangs in the balance.
Yeah, but we're not very fond of releasing terrorists into our country.
Kilmar Abrego Garcia was picked up by immigration officials on March 12th. He had been granted a legal status that prevented him from being deported back to El Salvador because he could face persecution there. In court filings, the U.S. admitted he was mistakenly deported, but says he is a member of MS-13. His lawyers say that isn't true. Last week, the Supreme Court upheld a lower court ruling to facilitate the release of the father of three and ensure his case is given due process. But the Trump administration has refused and passed the puck to El Salvador's president.
Of course, I'm not going to do it. It's like, the question is preposterous. How can I smuggle a terrorist into the United States? I don't have the power to return him to the United States.
Secretary of State Marco Rubio also pushed back.
I don't understand what the confusion is. This individual is a citizen of El Salvador. He was illegally in the United States and was returned to his country. That's where you deport people, back to their country of origin.
The Trump administration has agreed to pay El Salvador $6 million to imprison deportees for 1 year at its Terrorism Confinement Center, or CCOT. And President Trump has made it clear he'd like to continue the practice.
As many as possible. And I just asked the president, it's this massive complex that he built, jail complex. I said, can you build some more of them, please?
Lawyers for the U.S. government told the court Abrego Garcia is alive and secure in the prison. The next hearing in his case is scheduled for Tuesday in Maryland. Katie Nicholson, CBC News, Washington.
Coming up, getting new Canadians ready to cast their ballot, teaching the how and why ahead of an important election. That and more after the break. Stay with us. New Canadians dove into federal politics Saturday with a crash course on the electoral system. Roughly 60 people gathered for an informative session on voting at the South Sudanese Canadian Community Centre. Immigration Partnership Winnipeg says when someone first moves to Manitoba, they're often more focused on integration than participating in politics.
When people come here, they're overwhelmed with the need of settlement, integration. And it takes a long time for people to settle and integrate. So going for elections or voting sometimes is not a priority. But when people are exposed to the information to let them know why it is important, then they will make a decision.
The session covered the basics of voting, and it was also about assuring new Canadians of our democratic freedom. The latest statistics from Elections Canada show new Canadians tend to vote in lesser numbers than other Canadians, and they tend to be less interested in politics compared to more established immigrant voters. But as Katie Nicholson found out, some are feeling excited about the prospect of casting their first vote in such a consequential election.
We did tobogganing here, and we had maple syrup, and it was pretty cool, but it was quite adventurous as well.
Gaurav Merrick is going to vote in his first federal election. Like most Canadians, one major issue is weighing on his mind.
That person down south, it seems not fair how Trump is treating Canada especially.
But it isn't the only issue.
I really think there's too much immigration.
Fresh from the long process of becoming a citizen, he's now reckoning with issues of affordability.
I know I've come through the process.
Especially housing. Too much immigration, he says, hasn't helped.
Because now what's happened, there's your resources are getting divided. And I mean by job opportunities, I applied for over 250 job applications, and I just heard back from maybe 20 of them.
Data from Elections Canada shows only 42% of new Canadians were very interested in politics, compared with 51% of established immigrant electors. But this high-profile election is capturing the attention of many newcomers.
Have you decided who's going to vote already, or you're still debating?
In Calgary, these new Canadians are feeling the swell of patriotism heading into this election.
Because of that long kind of process that we've gone through, that's one of my main concerns. We definitely have started feeling more recently as well that spirit of being Canadian and really fighting for Canadian values.
That's how I feel like I am a Canadian. I'm a proud Canadian. I want to protect this country. I want to protect this life. I want to protect this community that we built together.
I know where I'll be casting the vote.
That fierce pride fueling Merrick to the polls too.
When someone attacks you, and especially externally, you feel much more guarded, and you try to defend, saying that, okay, this is an identity which I and we us stand for.
His first federal vote, and possibly the most important he'll ever cast. Katie Nicholson, CBC News, Toronto.
Donald Trump says he may consider pausing his tariffs on auto sector to give car makers time to adjust.
Looking at something to help some of the car companies where they're switching to parts that were made in Canada, Mexico, and other places, and they need a little bit of time because they're going to make them here, but they need a little bit of time. So I'm talking about things like that.
The U.S. president had slapped 25% auto tariffs on March 27th. His wide-ranging tariffs on countries and industries caused market panic last week, and the subsequent reversals have been creating uncertainty and confusion over his long-term goal. All right, many of us looking back, wanting that double-digit temperatures again. Let's bring in Ethan Williams for a look at our forecast.
Well, Brittany, in the wake of that weather system that we saw move through, our temperatures have dropped back closer to seasonal, or even in some cases, including in the Winnipeg area, a bit below seasonal for daytime highs, hovering in those single digits above the freezing mark. Some of us, though, the further east you went, struggling to get above the freezing mark, definitely didn't even get above +5 for Monday. And then you get into northern Manitoba, and that's where temperatures struggled to get above freezing at all. And in fact, some below seasonal conditions the further north you went, even up along the Hudson Bay coast, closer to -10 for temperatures there. But the good news is there is a bit of a change coming in terms of our temperature pattern over the next few days. The jet stream diving off well to our south here, but another ridge developing out west, and through Alberta and Saskatchewan, we're getting a warm up as we get into Tuesday. That'll start to reach western sections of Manitoba Tuesday and then continues to move eastward into the province as we get into Wednesday, as we're just under that ridge, even though we see a bit of a breakdown in the jet stream as we get into Thursday, as that next system starts to cross northern Manitoba and bring some snow through. But as we head overnight Monday into Tuesday, temperatures pretty seasonal for overnight lows. Again, many of us hovering kind of in between that freezing and -5 mark. We'll be seeing some clearing as that high pressure moves in. So clear skies out west, still some lingering cloud cover in eastern sections, and especially through northwestern Ontario, maybe a few lingering flurries after the snowfall that you've seen there. Into northern Manitoba, again, cloud cover starting to break apart in the overnight hours and into the early morning. But as we start to head into the day, that's when that high pressure departs. That next weather system starts to move in, and especially for communities closer to the Saskatchewan border, as we get later into the afternoon, that's when we start to see that cloud cover and maybe even a little bit of some snowfall moving through. For the rest of the north, though, looking at a fairly sunny day. For southern Manitoba, we enter a pretty nice day for Tuesday as we see temperatures starting the day near the freezing mark. That high pressure fully in place by the noon hour, meaning some nice sunny skies for many of us as temperatures start to take off. And by the afternoon, later into the afternoon, some of us even getting over the double digits for daytime highs, while in northwestern Ontario still hanging back a bit around that +5 mark. And so a fairly nice Tuesday and a bit of a more unsettled Wednesday in store for us coming up.
We're down in the Exchange District at the Creatory Gallery and Studio, where they are having their final exhibit in these last few weeks. Jordan Miller is the owner here. And Jordan, tell me a little bit about what this exhibit is.
So this exhibition is a series of abstract landscapes. It's all about being free and fun and having a good time while you create art, and also just a great way to express myself. So this piece here was the catalyst to the series. What happened was I spilled a little bit of yellow and a little bit of blue, which makes green. So I called this piece Beyond the Green. And I was starting a new technique where I would pull the ink to the side, which made it build up in different spots, which actually makes it sort of like stained glass. And if you take a close look here, you can see how the colors have sort of joined and created these beautiful marks of different colors. And then what I do is I take a Posca pen and I dot it, and those dots are all hand done.
And this is what sparked this exhibit.
This is what sparked it.
18 years you've been in this location, and unfortunately you're going to be closing at the end of the month. Tell me what went into having to make that decision.
So in 2018, we had signed a lease for 2020, and then the pandemic started. So instead of increasing the rent for all of my tenants, I decided that we would keep it the same. And that way people wouldn't up and leave when things were a little bit crazy. So I just carried on and hoped for the best. And now I look at that amount and think there's no way that we could continue.
There's a whole lot going on in the world right now, and we don't have to get into the specific numbers, but one of the things you were talking about was it's 4 to 5 times the increase of what you were seeing when you started here. How difficult is it for people like yourselves, for artists, for creatives, to make ends meet in this kind of economy?
So in order to be a good business, as everybody knows, you have to present your products and sell them, and when products aren't selling, then you have to throw in the towel a little bit or change your prices to accommodate the market, which isn't really acceptable in the arts community because the prices are already fairly low, and it's supporting local is really important. And if you have a couple extra dollars, it's always good to keep your dollars in Manitoba.
Tell me a little bit about what these last 18, 20 years have been like for you in this community.
It's been great. The people I work with are fabulous. I have no complaints. I've made lots of friends. I feel like they're my family. Some of the artists are like my parents. And I feel sad that I'm going to have to close, and I'm not going to ever lose those friends, but I feel like I'm not supporting them in the same way, but I'm going to continue in other ways.
What do you want people to know about the art community that we have here in Winnipeg and in Manitoba?
I think everybody, there's so many artists for one, and everybody really works together as a team. They all support each other. They come out to shows. They buy artwork by other artists. There's a large number of artists. I can't even tell you how many people I meet. And after 18 years, I think, oh, I know all the artists in Winnipeg. And then somebody new walks in the door and I think, I don't know you yet. Who are you? Which makes me really curious how many more there are out there.
So April 20th? Is the last day?
April 19th is the last day that we're open, and April 20th is the first day that we're closed.
What do you want people to know? When can they come down, visit, and hopefully pick up some amazing pieces?
So stop by Tuesday through Saturday from 11 to 5. And if you want to come after hours, you just have to contact me to make an appointment.
All right, Jordan, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Creatory Gallery and Studio open until April 19th. Still ahead, a star-studded crew back on Earth. Plus, your last look at our forecast. Stay with us. This is Manitoba. And this is Manitoba on your smart TV, because CBC News is now streaming local. Get local headlines, weather, and community notices, plus newscasts and live programming on your favorite connected device, all for free. It's called the CBC News Manitoba streaming channel. See your community on your connected TV and mobile devices. CBC News Manitoba, your local news streaming channel, now available. American pop singer Katy Perry is back on planet Earth after being launched into orbit earlier today. She's one of the members of an all-female crew that traveled together as part of a Blue Origin space mission. CBS morning show host Gayle King was also on board. They were joined by 4 other women, including Lauren Sanchez, a former journalist and current fiancé of Blue Origin founder Jeff Bezos. The mission launched this morning at 9:30 Eastern and lasted for 11 minutes.
We'll get out and enjoy Tuesday before the wind picks up and the clouds build in for Wednesday. We're looking for some possible showers Wednesday as well. Showers should be out here by Thursday. We are left with cloud cover, and then temperatures on a bit of a roller coaster ride here. We drop a bit into Friday as we see some clearing skies, but we have a bit of a chilly overnight Friday into Saturday, as you can see there, before temperatures start to smarten up again. The weekend looking pretty nice, especially on Sunday as those temperatures take off. Our next weather system making to make an impact on Monday. Looks like at this point we will be seeing some rain showers for the most part as those temperatures stay above seasonal for this time of year, and those overnight lows, Brittany, staying above the freezing mark for the most part.
Thanks, Ethan. Well, if you thought you've seen all kinds of Easter traditions, here's one from Bosnia that really nails it. It's our Daily Lift. Behold the practice of egg shoeing, an intricate craft that involves attaching miniature horseshoes to eggshells to create a decorative piece. It's a custom passed down through generations in this small Bosnian town. The ability to shoe an egg was seen as a sign that a blacksmith apprentice was ready to branch out on his own. Very cool, but I don't think we'll be seeing any of those this Easter here. Have a wonderful night. I'll see you back here tomorrow.